Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rahul Bose needs no introduction to all of you, I'm sure. But I will tell you a little bit about his credentials about rugby, because that's something that's not as familiar as his work on the silver screen. So, Mr. Rahul Bose was one of the first members of the 1998 Indian rugby team, which was the first rugby team to take part in an international tournament in the Asian Rugby Football Union tournament in 1998. He retired from competitive rugby in 2009 and has since served on the board of India Rugby and is now the serving president of India Rugby. And he has some big plans to take rugby forward in India, and we'll let him tell you about that over the course of the next 40 minutes or so. Welcome, Rahul, to Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Shanaka. For those who, I guess, hardly anybody knows, but Shanaka and I have been in a film together, Midnight's Children, which was shot in Colombo, and 10, 12 years ago, Shanaka. We didn't have a scene together, but he's in the film, as I am too. So who would know that you and I would be sitting on the same stage here. Thank you. Thanks for coming. I have no clue why I'm here. This is supposed to be a literature festival, and whatever I'm going to talk to you about is certainly about life. I don't know how much of literature you're going to get out of this one. So those who want to leave, you have been warned. You can exit immediately, followed by a bear, as Shakespeare would say. So I think I'm going to lay the context of what we're going to be talking about, Shanaka, because I don't think anybody here would be aware of the ecosystem of this tiny sport called rugby in India. India is 1.5 billion people, divided into 760 districts, approximately, depending on which survey you look at. So approximately 2 million people in a district. And rugby is played in 322 of these districts. So potentially you have 645 million people to tap. Obviously not all of them. You need young boys and girls. So let's divide that by a fifth and say that you have 130 million people that you can actually tap into. So it's a massive pool of people that you could potentially tap into in the country. Now, who plays the sport? The poorest of the poor. So we have all our players, almost barring maybe one out of 65,000 would look like me. Everybody else comes from the absolute bottom of the pyramid. And why that's happened is something that's really interesting, even to me from the outside. So you have 322 districts, 650 million people, 100 million catchment area, the poorest of the poor, which immediately makes it 50 million. And then you look at what we call tribals, and this might be politically incorrect in other societies, but the original settlers of the land, the Adivasis or the tribals, are actually categorized by the government into scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So I would hazard a guess, we never do a census, that would not be correct, but I would hazard a guess out of our approximately, depending what count you look at, between 50,000 and 100,000 players in the whole country, half of them would be tribal. Maybe Aboriginals, maybe original settlers, Native Americans, I don't know what you call it in your countries, so please don't be offended when I say tribals. That's how we refer to them in India. So by the very nature of their classification, they come from the bottom of the pyramid, the socio-economic pyramid. And we also have the rest of our players coming in from very straitened financial circumstances in society. But it wasn't that way when it started. When rugby was when I started playing rugby in 1984, because before most of you were born, it was played by 2, maybe 3 of the most elite schools in the country, 6, maybe 8 clubs, and that was it. And the sea change, Shanaka, that happened between that time in '84 to the time we were officially recognized as a rugby playing nation in 1998 to the early 2000s was as follows. Something very gratifying, very beautiful, and very welcome in any country's sporting history happened to India in the early 2000s. Our athletes and players in sports outside cricket began to do well. Table tennis. It started with tennis, Leander and Mahesh. It continues with tennis to Rohan right now, who's just retired. Sania in the middle. We had Saina and Sindhu in badminton, started by Prakash in 1982. Table tennis, we began to do well. Badminton, tennis, even golf. Somebody like Aditi Ashok, who almost was a whisker away from an Olympic bronze 8 years ago or whenever it was, from Bangalore. So the point I'm trying to make is that middle class and upper middle class India gravitated towards sports that could create some fame, pathway, and a life for their players, because these sports began to show light to youngsters. And so the few people who were playing rugby vanished. Why would you break your nose, as I have 4 times, for free? Why would you smash 6 fingers or have 76 stitches on your face or have a torn rotator cuff as we speak and 3 surgeries on your knees for what? To play for your club? You know, like, where's the payoff? So there was an existential crisis with this sport in the early 2000s. And then this, I don't believe in fate, destiny, kismet, luck, but something happened around that time which was to chart the future of Indian rugby, I presume at least for the next 30, 40 years. A non-profit organization called Jungle Crows goes to the largest tribal school in the world. 30,000 tribal boys and girls, and I've been there. Their breakfast table is a football field. 30,000 tribal kids are fed, housed, clothed, and educated for free for 12 years. This is in Odisha, in the state of Odisha and Bhubaneswar. Into this tribal school, which is called the Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences, KISS, goes this NGO. And the gentleman who runs this NGO, Jungle Crows, is a huge rugby lover, continues to be one till today. And takes out this misshapen ball, or so the kids think, from his bag one evening and chucks it to the kids, who take the ball and run away and disappear. And they come back half an hour later, huffing and puffing and saying that this ball is defective, it's not, we tried to pump it with air, it's not becoming round, it's staying oval. Long story short, in a matter of months, there's an informal World School Games, Shanaka, in Paris, where there are schools from South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, England, France playing, and these kids win. These tribal kids win that tournament. And that sends ripples across the rugby fraternity, but those ripples are taken great cognizance of by the Indian Rugby Federation, of which I wasn't a part at the time. I was playing for India till 2009. We're talking the early 2000s. And then the thought is planted in the Federation's mind that what if we decide to do a rural outreach for the sport? Amongst kids who don't have the access to coaches and cricket bats and tennis rackets and, hard courts and wooden badminton courts, and you get my point. You just need a ball and a piece of land. I'm speaking in a country which has done so gloriously in the sport. And Shanaka was telling me how from being an elitist sport in Sri Lanka, it in the last 15 years has slowly molted into becoming a sport for everybody. Am I right?
Absolutely.
And so, the growth of rugby in Sri Lanka is an inspiration for us. So that starts the outreach by design by the Federation into rural and tribal areas of the country. And now we cut to where we are today. Shanaka said, I had big plans. I have no plans. I only have plans depending on what the rugby fraternity wants me to do. I am there for whatever they want me to do. I'm there to facilitate it. But having said that, I joined the board of the Indian Rugby Federation 2 years before I became president. And while I was on the board, I began to study specific sports in specific countries at specific times. How did they take off? How did gymnastics take off in China? Diving take off in China? What was the movement behind athletics and the NCAA becoming the engine for superb athletes in America, in the USA? What was the deal with East Germany or Russia in the 80s in the 2 or 3 sports that we associate them with, weightlifting or whatever it might be? For better or for worse, I just studied all these models to find out what is it that actually powers, accelerates, energizes, fuels a movement in a particular sport at a particular point of time in a particular country. And after sitting down with that, it was very clear to me that there are 3 phases in a sports in our development, in a sports development, that happens in a country. I keep using the word country because that's the easiest region to identify. The first stage is amateurs. When I played, India played its first ever test match against Singapore, and we were hammered ruthlessly in October 1998 at the National Stadium. And we just paid for ourselves. Our ticket was paid for. When we wanted to eat something extra, even if it was a banana, we paid for it. Some of the poorer boys in our not so well-off boys in our team, we took them for a meal. It was just very amateurish. A coach came down from some part of the world, charged us very little, or did it ex gratis, and hung out with us and coached us, and that's how we started. And so the first phase of any sports evolution is we are under the radar, we don't exist. Let's do things as best we can. You put something in, you put something in, you put something in, and we'll have potluck and hope something happens. And after a while, that part wears thin. And people are like, listen, enough. I'm going broke, or I'm not going to break my bones, or this is the glory of playing for India. We have to get better. We just can't keep getting thrashed on the rugby field. That's the part when I joined the board 2 years before I became president. And I began to say, okay, first I have to ask myself, what is my dream for Indian rugby? And my dream for Indian rugby is very simple. We should be right up there, top of the world, amongst other countries, in rugby sevens. And I'll get to why rugby sevens in a bit. Second, why are you doing this? Personal aggrandizement. You want to line your coffers and siphon out money. You think you will be more relevant in society and your brand will increase. Or, as in my case, I just want to see Indian players, all of whom come from disenfranchised backgrounds, to be super powerful. Them, their families, their communities, their neighborhoods, their villages. That is why I would like to do this. Once I had settled the what and the why, till today it nourishes me. I need to look for nothing else. If you're planning a tournament for the nationals, ordinarily you would say, who are our sponsors? Where would you like us to have it? You have a factory in North India, we'll have it in Delhi. It'll play well for you. The television guys say that we should have it at a well-known city, let's have it in Mumbai. For me, it's very simple. Which is the best ground? which is the best ground that my players would love to play on? A ground you can dance on, you can eat off of. A ground which on the fifth day will still hold. A ground that is kind to my players' feet. A ground that is quick but not brutal. Which is the best ground in this month, in this country? Then, what's the food like there? What can we give them to eat? What are the hotels? What's the catering? And finally, where will they stay? That is the decision. And that will always be the decisive factor. The player has to be at the center of everything we do. Every single thing. To the point which, when I became president, the first tournament we had was for the under-18 girls, Asians, and they came to camp, I still remember, in Bhubaneswar. And I was there, the secretary of the federation, the CEO of the federation, the head coach, just 6 of us. And at 10 o'clock at night, one person took a towel, the other person put a little bottle of shampoo, the third person put a bottle of coconut oil, the fourth person put a bottle of mosquito repellent, the fifth person put a female menstruation product that we had to put in there, etc., etc., etc. And we made these care packages and just put it on the beds of our 35 girls. Cost, 0. Benefit, immeasurable. Because all a player wants, all any of us want in our lives, is to be loved. It's simple. You just have to love. And anything you do, even if it's wrong, will never be taken in the wrong way. So, the first phase of Indian rugby compared to any sport in any country is over. I knew we were entering the second phase. This is the hardest phase. This is the phase where you have to step up, build a high-performance center, build your 360-degree high-performance coach, strength and conditioning, sports science, rehabilitation, insurance for the players, pay the players, food, nutritionist, psychologist. Who's going to pay for all of this? But it's like that Indiana Jones film where he tries to cross the chasm and there's nothing there. He's like, are you crazy? I can't just step into the chasm. I'm going to die. And they said, believe. And he steps into the chasm, and as he steps in, a little pedestal comes to protect him. And he takes the next step, and something comes to protect him. Unless you take that step, the world is never going to realize that you're serious. So what we did was we put in the funds from people who were just passionate, nothing else. They didn't really believe. Got some funds, twisted some arms, begged some people, kissed some ass, and got the funds to create, for the first time, a semi-professional environment where our players, till today, are paid to come to national camp, are paid to play tournaments, are paid if they meet their bronze or whatever, medals, etc. To the point where innumerable players have come to me and said in Hindi, "Aapki badaulat ghar ka chulha jalta hai." It's because of you, not me, but us, that the fires in our home are burning. So, this is the toughest phase because you're investing and you have no clue how you're going to do, how it's going to pay off. And this phase, typically in a team sport as massive as rugby, played in 120, 140 countries in the world, would take you about 20 years, 30 years. So, I don't have 20, 30 years. I'm going to be way dead before that. So I said, okay, fine. If this is going to be the case, then what can we do outside of what we are doing? We have the best coaches on the planet who have coached us in the past. Vaisale Serevi, World Cup winner, Fiji captain, Fiji coach, twice World Cup winner. We've had Ben Gollings, the greatest, highest point scorer, try scorer in Sevens history, coaching. So we've had great names. We continue to do that. And that's when, Shanaka, I conceived of the Rugby Premier League. Wasn't reinventing the wheel. It's like the IPL. But the dream was the best of India will play with the best in the world. And we'll get 6 franchise teams to buy into this, so that tomorrow the dream is that these 6 teams located in 6 of the top cities in India where rugby is not played. Rugby is played in 322 districts that half of India doesn't know the names of those districts. If rugby is played in any city in India, it's in the slums. We're talking about a spiffy Rugby Premier League, very, very aspirational, very glamorous, top-class rugby, the 30 best rugby players on the planet, playing with Indian players, in 6 cities that we are selling the franchises of: Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Bhubaneswar, where, barring Bhubaneswar, rugby is really not played. So the dream is, we just had season 1 last year. In season 2 and season 3, it's already started happening. These teams will start to build their mini rugby infrastructures in order to win the next year. Where can we have the camp? Where do we have the sports science center? Where do our players go for rehabilitation? Who else can we get as a coach in the off season? How do we recruit new talent across the country? And so, without us doing anything as a federation, you have 6 sub-centers of rugby blossoming with money brought in by 6 owners. To a point where, across the country, it's destined, wrong word, it is going to happen. In the next 5 years, you're going to see kids across this country, not this country, my country, looking at the logo of one of these teams, and it just signifies hope, future, security. So the RPL, the Rugby Premier League, has been designed as a silver bullet to accelerate, or rather compress, the 20-year midpoint period, the second phase of a federation, to about 10 years. What's going to happen is you're going to have men and women, our men and women, playing with the best players on the planet. But how did we make this happen? How is this the first franchise-based league in the world? How did we make this happen? Why would they come to India? They wouldn't. We're not Australia or France or Fiji or New Zealand. Because the first piece of the puzzle is we got 6 of the best coaches in the world to handle each franchise. So when I went and met the best players in the world in Perth 2 years ago at the HSBC 7 Series, all of them, they were all there in the room, the best players on the planet. I was like, I'm in rugby heaven. And they said, who are the coaches? And when I gave those 6 names, Shanaka, that is when they said, wow, you guys aren't messing around. And that's when they began to understand. Of course, we had a fantastic ground, brilliant pitch, all of that stuff. So all of that brought them in. Once you get the coaches, once you have the players, then automatically, you know you have a world-class product which is going to go out across 200 countries on rugbypass.tv. And of course, our Indian partners, all of that is separate. But we had Jio Hotstar, we had Star Sports, all of that happened, and it was just fantastic. It was just amazing to see those players play. So that RPL will come in as a vitamin injection every year into our calendar. And that will then coast through to the second phase. The second phase, Shanaka, will end when you guys, Sri Lanka, are right now playing the elite rung in the men's, not the women's, but the men, in the elite rung of the men's championship. That is when we will know that we have entered the last phase. Today, our Indian women are 6th in Asia out of 32 countries. Our men are 12th in Asia. For perspective, if you get to the top 2 in Asia, you're going to make it to the Olympic Games. So we have to climb 4 places. Can we do that by 2032? I think we can. It's 7 places. 6 places. So that, at that point of time, when we are playing with the big girls and the big boys, then we are here, when we are there. And at that point of time, what will happen with the grassroots of the sport is that every kid will be paid not to get into national camp. As soon as they play for their state, India is made up of 37 states. As soon as they play for their state, they'll start to get paid. So all they have to do is play for their district and aspire to get to the state, and then they know they have a career. When we start paying our state players, right now we play our national players and probables, when we start paying our state players, and the money comes from the top, and this push comes from the bottom, then we will have reached the virtuous circle, and then you won't need to listen to me gas for 45 minutes anymore. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rahul. You've been described as intense. Is it fair to say that you bring that to your rugby preparations as well? Because it sounds like a very ambitious project you've kicked off on, because Sri Lanka have been playing rugby for 120 years or so, and I would still say we're in stage 2, towards the latter half of stage 2. So you're trying to create that culture top-down very quickly. So it's an ambitious project.
And bottom-up, Shanaka, but I won't take your time with that. Okay, so intense. In my last test match for India that I was playing, I wasn't good enough to make the front 15. I was one of the 7 reserves. It was 15s rugby. So I was between 60 and 22, those 7 numbers. And it's a long story, and it's really painful. But suffice to say, I was 18, so I would come on in the second half, and the coach never took me on. He never brought me on. He brought 21 players on for that game, and never brought me on for my last test match after playing for India for 10 years. Because he was deeply jealous of the fact that I would get all the attention in India when people said rugby as opposed to him. And I can't help that. I was a movie star. What am I going to do about that? So it's at that moment I swore that I would not retire like this. And I came back the next year. They threw that coach out, and I played for India. Point being this. Whenever I enter into anything, and this was something I'm sure all of you have been through, whenever you do something and you give yourself marks out of 10, like I spoke well, 8 out of 10. I played well, 9 out of 10. I wrote well, 6 out of 10. You can be sure the world thinks half of that. They'll give you a 4 or 3 or 5. So if you want to be 9 out of 10 rated by the world, you have to be 18 out of 10 in your own eyes. And you have to be so good that if anybody dares to discriminate against you, like I was discriminated against, the shame is on them, not on you. And so, whatever I do, I leave my body on the field, as our coach used to say from New Zealand. Whatever I do in my life, I leave my body on the field. I don't care if intensity is not cool, if it's easy, it's much cooler to chill and be relaxed and languid. I don't give a shit. I'm here to do something that I love, that my heart burns to do every day, not because I have to prove anything to anyone. It's just because I just want to do something for those kids.
And speaking about those kids, it's something we've been noticing recently, Rahul, as well in Sri Lanka, because we've had a kind of a turn from being a very elite sport back in the 20s, 30s, a less elite sport, maybe upper middle class played it back in the 60s and 70s. And now it's very much a sport of the masses. Everyone's kids want to play rugby. And there's a hunger to that, isn't there? Because rugby is not an easy sport. As you said, it's not something you've got to have your arm in a sling sometimes. You've got to bandage yourself. You've got to put Vaseline on your cuts and bruises. And it's not a fun sport to play sometimes when you come off. But these kids who have to do this to keep their home fires burning, as you were saying, kids who have to do this to get out of desperately difficult circumstances, do you find that's a huge characteristic you need in the rugby players that you're trying to build through?
My answer is going to be directly opposite to what you think it's going to be. Absolutely no. Hunger has nothing to do with deprivation. For every one girl or boy who fights to be on that field to feed her family, I'll show you 9 of them sitting at home doing nothing, cursing the circumstances, sitting under a banyan tree and doing nothing. Some of the best most hungry sports persons in India, I know, have been very well off. Sachin Tendulkar, Rahul Dravid, Anil Kumble. You show me 3 people with more hunger than these people. Vishy, Anand. They've not been deprived. No. Hunger comes from something else. Hunger comes from enormous self-respect. Hunger comes from there, that I'm worth, I can do better. This is not enough for me. I'm capable of doing more. I believe hunger comes from them. It does not come from deprivation. It would be so easy then to say that. And but as I said, I've given you 4 living examples of if there's anybody Indian in this audience, the hungriest, most driven, most disciplined, most incredibly hardworking sports persons I've ever seen. They were not deprived.
And how do you create that self-respect, that self-worth? How do you build that into your culture?
You can't. You can't.
So it's upbringing?
No. You can show them. You can show them what they are capable of. But you can't be sure that they'll do it. Come on. How many geniuses do we know who knew what they were capable of but didn't do it? Some of them very poor, I know. In hockey, for example, some of them very wealthy. It's not got to do with money. So you can only show them this is how satisfying realizing your potential is. But whether you do it or not is character, man, Shanaka. It's just character. So you have to then pick the ones you know have character, the ones who will die for the team, especially in the team sport, the ones who, and especially in rugby. I mean, what a metaphor for life. If you want to take one step forward in this game and you try and do it alone, you'll go to hospital. If you want to move forward in this game, you have to rely on other people. What a fantastic metaphor for life. And that's what I keep telling our kids. If you want to move ahead in life, learn from this game. Take people with you. You can't do it alone.
Rahul gave you the warning early on saying you're not going to learn anything about literature, but that's why we read literature, isn't it? To find out about characters, to learn about characters, what makes them tick. And this is something that he's going to come across as he takes this rugby journey across India, and we wish him all the best.